Thank you, Tim. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming. The topic tonight is good news. It's a new book. I shouldn't say new book. It's a newly translated book from Chico Xavier. And then obviously we're going to take from the Gospel according to Spiritism as well, which obviously the Gospel is part of the 5-book codification of Spiritism, filled with all kinds of great stuff, and some of that we'll touch on tonight as we talk about the good news, which oftentimes is what the New Testament's referred to, right, or the Gospel of Christ, right, the good news. The new book that I mentioned, the recently translated book, is this one. It's a great read. It basically starts with Christ, from early life all the way through following the crucifixion, just his teachings, conversations with apostles, questions from disciples, from the public, and chapter by chapter, really short chapters. So I like it because it's quick and easy for me to read, right? Because I don't like to read a lot. I don't have a lot of time, but it takes you through the interpretation of his teaching. So I think you'll enjoy it. I know I did very much. And we'll jump in and talk about this more right now. From the Gospel, and actually a lot of the Spiritist reading that you do, we talk a lot about being created simple and lacking knowledge, being imperfect, right? Especially if we're on the earth, right? We're definitely imperfect spirits. And we're asked, or it's stated, that many of us may not be happy with our progress. I mean, how many of us, you don't have to raise your hands, but how many of us can say we're just, everything's perfect, we're living the dream and really mean it all the time, right? We may be in a situation where we're just not happy with our progress. And the Gospel dives into this and asks, or states again that perhaps we're not where we want to be, or we're not progressing at a rate that we're comfortable with, because we might be guided by our base tendencies, right? Our animal instincts, or driven by our pride, or consumed by a lack of humbleness. Obviously, pride, ego, and a lack of humbleness are all opposite or resistant to living a Christ-like life, right? If we're caught up in these things. And if we're guided by these pillars, then obviously we're going to feel as though we're not progressing as we should at some point. And I equate this to, are we fighting ourselves, right? We are eternal spirits, right? At the moment, imprisoned in this physical envelope, right, called a body. We're living a human life, a material life. But ultimately, that material life is temporary. It's transient. It's a small blip in time compared to our eternal life as a spirit. I equate it to those cartoons when I was a kid. You got the little devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other with the halo, right? We're kind of in a fight amongst ourselves, the material self versus that eternal self. And the Gospel reiterates over and over, as well as the Spirit's book, talks about how our pride and ego is really tied to our senses, right? If it feels good to your if it pleases your eyes, if it pleases your taste buds, if it pleases your physical senses, if that's what you're living for, is that type of fulfillment or satisfaction. A lot of times that's tied to pride and ego, right? It's driving us or repelling our ability to be humble. For example, what's easier, what's more enjoyable, to devote half of a day on Sunday to go feed the homeless, or go spend half a day at the Brazilian barbecue, right? But what's easier, right? What's more pleasing to the senses versus maybe what's a better way to go? Does that make sense, or am I oversimplifying? That's how I look at it, right? Because I could definitely eat some barbecue, right? But overindulging and enjoying that, although it's great, it's probably better to do that other thing more often than the first. As we spend more time trapped in our ego or driven by our pride, it definitely reduces our ability to be compassionate. And if we can't be compassionate, then we're not living in that true sense of love or that true sense of Christ-like example. And we know from his teachings, right, from the good news, that humbleness is what prepares us to live compassionately. If we are living from our ego, and I've shared this with you before, but I like the acronym for ego, standing for edging God out, EGO, right? Edging God out. If we're edging God out and living pridefully or egotistically, then it's really hard to show other people compassion, other people love. We don't see each other as equals. We don't see each other as worthy of our time. It really becomes all about us moving ahead and getting ahead. But if we're humble, if we're living compassionately, it's real easy to treat others like a brother and sister. And as such, living compassionately, what happens? What's the byproduct of that? We evolve, right? We elevate our moral development, we elevate our spirit, and we definitely become tied less to our senses. And the less we're tied to our senses, the more we're living out of love, the more we evolve. So easy, right? All right, we can go home now. We're done. Go out and do good. It's not that easy, right? But it's so important, right, that the gospel goes on to tell us, and Christ showed us, right, with the way he lived and with the way he died, that we should kind of not necessarily rejoice in suffering injustice from others, but not resent them, not hate them, not seek revenge. Actually pray for them, love them, do whatever we can to wish them well, right? Because when someone offends us, when someone slanders us, when someone does us wrong, what is it? It's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to forgive. It's an opportunity to turn the other cheek. Right? It's an opportunity to practice what Christ taught us. What did he do on the cross? Right? He prayed for his crucifiers, right? For his murderers. He forgave them. He asked God, to forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. If we can simply accept people doing bad things or saying bad things about us as another trial, it becomes easier and easier not to live a life of revenge or hate or trying to get ahead. Just move on. It reminds me of events, right? If somebody does something to me, right, and I don't forgive them, if I hold on to it and I constantly think about it, and it prevents me from living my life fully, that event may have happened once, that offense happened once, but every time I relive it, every time I think about it, every time I seek revenge, it's happening again, right? Over and over. There's studies that show the actual process of pain, right? Let's say cutting your finger, right? If in an MRI study, certain areas of your brain fire, right? Well, the same thing happens if you think about the experience. So an offense that someone committed against you may have only happened once, but every time you think about it and hold on to it, it's almost as if you're reliving it again and again at the brain level and the emotional level. So further evidence, right? Not just because Christ showed us, but just the science tells us to forget, to forgive, and to put it behind you, not to hang on to it. And Christ left us all of this knowledge, right? He left us his doctrine, giving us examples of all these different virtues. And the gospel is pretty adamant, pretty strong that generation after generation continues to ignore them, right? Just like when Moses, right, brought the Ten Commandments and the Mosaic Law, Jesus came, right, to kind of put that into perspective, to explain that. But at that time, with Moses, his time, they killed sheep. They had sacrifices, and what they equate this to is when we ignore Christ's teachings, when we disregard those lessons he taught us, it's our modern day example of worshiping the golden calf, and again feeds our ego, feeds our pride. When we don't follow that example of Christ, which we call here, which I relate to frequently, right? It creates a situation that we talk about a lot here, right? Cause and effect. When I am making choices contrary to Christ's example, contrary to the good news, contrary to the gospel, contrary to the golden rule, right? Love others as you treat others as you'd like to treat yourself. I'm creating a debt. I'm creating an offense that was going to create my reality in the next second, in the next life, in lifetimes to come. I'm living, you're living, we're living today the consequences of choices we made lifetimes ago, right? Slowly but surely evolving, but cannot escape consequences, cannot escape the debt that we owe for the choices that we made or didn't make, for that matter. Our thoughts, our words, our actions all have consequences that ultimately have to be reconciled. And in chapter 1 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, they talk about Moses, right? They talk about the Ten Commandments, and they really point out to us that remember, Christ was crucified. There's so many ways to look at it, but ultimately, I think, right, he challenged authority at the time. It was political, it was power. Christ was speaking differently than the common culture at the time, the common beliefs, the common laws, accused of breaking the law. But we're told, right, we know Christ didn't come to say the Ten Commandments aren't right or they don't make sense. He came to explain them. He came to clarify them, to define them in a way that could be understood at that time. Just as we're understanding our lessons in our time, with our ability, with our intelligence, at our level of evolution, Christ spoke to the people of the time in allegory, right? In stories, in a way that they could understand, right? Because they just weren't necessarily ready, perhaps, as we might be, for more information. So as far as the progress of society at the time, Christ spoke to them through his teachings, what we call the good news, what ultimately became the New Testament. Not to say the Old Testament's wrong, not to say Mosaic law was necessarily wrong, but to cultivate it, to explain it, to expand on it. So he definitely was more than a lawgiver, all right? He didn't just deliver these laws or these commandments. He taught us how to live, not only with his words, but his actions. If we knew nothing about Christ per se from a religious perspective, or let's say we could be atheists, we could be agnostic, we could be any faith in the world, right? Not Christian necessarily, right? If someone described to you or to us how Christ lived his life, and they asked you this question, how would you think you would respond? If the world lived like Christ on a daily basis, you think it would be a better place? Absolutely, right? With no historical understanding or belief in Christ, however you might believe in him. If we just ask that simple question of humanity, we described the way Christ lived, we described the things he said and did, how he acted, and you ask that question, do you think the world would be better if we all acted more like him? There's no disputing that the world would be a better place, right? It would have to be, I think. Am I wrong? Don't be afraid. I love disagreement. It's good. We grow when we disagree. It's respectfully, of course. So that's my take on that. In the gospel itself, it actually states this. It says, wake up, right? Listen, what's the quote here? Listen to the voices of the good spirits. Let their words echo in our hearts. Be generous, be loving, do good quietly, right? We live our lives today, especially in a very loud world, a very busy world. You can't go more than a couple seconds without this thing buzzing, without a news flash, without a message, a text, a snap, a this or that. I don't even know what you guys call it, right? I'm not up to all that. But my point is, we are bombarded with information all the time. And a lot of it takes us away from being generous, of being loving, right? We can, and I'm definitely guilty of this as well. It's hard to do good quietly these days because we take pictures of everything we do and put it on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be. I actually, by mistake, by accident, I got booted off of Facebook maybe a year ago almost, but I got hacked and I couldn't retrieve my account, and I just didn't try anymore. And I don't know how to explain it, but I'm happier, man. I, for whatever reason, not being on Facebook has been very good for me. But the way we live, the things we're bombarded with, we have to be reminded, just like then, even more so today, that we have to wake up. That life, driven by ego, driven by pride, by showcasing every little thing that we do, not being generous or loving, takes us away from our true eternal purpose, which is to do good, to be generous, to be loving. Making sense? All right. And by no means am I telling you I do all these things. I'm just as messed up sometimes as some of the things they talk about, where I don't live like this. But every day I get up and I try, right? Just like you. In chapter 17, the gospel points out, talks about a verse in the Bible, a section of the Bible that says, where Christ says, "Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect." And they talk a little bit about this in the Good News, as well as in the Gospel according to Spiritism. It reminds us that if we take that literally, it would imply that we could become a God ourselves. We could become divine or God's equal. And they want to point out that that's just not the case, right? There's only one God. Christ wasn't a God. Christ was a pure spirit, obviously, created simple and lacking knowledge like the rest of us, right? We all started in the same place. And over lifetime, he evolved, right? And they tell us, look, there's only one God, there's many pure spirits. Christ just happens to be the purest spirit that ever walked the earth in human form. And we're reminded of this ability, or this destiny, if you will, of Christ-like perfection. As we live life after life, as we grow morally, as we evolve morally, we all are destined to become perfect spirits, pure spirits. If we're on earth, we're nowhere close, right? We still have a lot to do. We're still tied dramatically or strongly to ego, to pride, to material things, as opposed to love. But we will evolve to Christ-like perfection. We're reminded that Christ in and of himself, in the sense of dying for our sins or taking away sin in a savior type way, is not the case, right? The way he lived, the example that he set for us, the way he showed us to live, if we can emulate that, that is saving us, right? That is our salvation. If we can emulate that Christ lifestyle, if we can emulate that Christ-like behavior, ultimately evolving just like he did to that Christ-like perfection. That was always a challenge for me growing up. I grew up in a more traditional, I guess, form of religion or Christianity. And it was always hard for me to understand, how could God be a man and a spirit, that Holy Trinity they talk about? I always had a hard time with that. And this just makes a lot of sense to me, that Christ is not God. He showed us how to live, and if we emulate that, we do save ourselves by following his example, little by little. So they define or talk about the essence of perfection. In other words, it wasn't through his death, right, that saved us necessarily, right? It was he showed us the answer with how he lived. He loved his enemies, truly loved his enemies, prayed for them in his dying breath, in his last breaths, prayed for them, forgave them, told one of them, see you again, right? I'm paraphrasing. He taught us to do good to those that hate us. Does that mean you invite them for dinner? You ask them to dance? No. It just means that you don't seek revenge. You don't live to see their demise. You don't pray for their demise. And I can remember a time in my life where I really got caught up in business. I was growing a successful business. It got bigger. We had competitors. And I can remember wanting them to fail. Guess what happened? I basically went broke, a couple of years later, because I just got caught so up into the thing, right, that I fell really strong. Best thing that ever happened to me, right, because I think it really helped me grow. But the point is, I learned the lesson a hard way, I think. Christ taught us this. It's very simple. Just because somebody does us wrong, just because they don't agree with us or they hurt us, doesn't mean we should hate them or pray for them to fail or do poorly. We should pray for those that persecute us. And we're reminded that love is the fullest sense of perfection. The practice of love implies the practice of all other virtues. So even if we can't name all the virtues, we don't really know what they all are. If we can just simply practice love, we are encompassing all those virtues that Christ encapsulated and taught us. And they remind us again, right, little by little, right, as we embrace that example of Christ, as we accept his way of life as ours and follow him better, right, that we're going to tear down the altars that we've erected in our heart to pride. It's impossible to be completely loving and then have ego at the same time, right? That's detrimental. They're opposite. They resist each other. So if we live by the teachings of Christ and we stop questioning the goodness of God, little by little, we will eradicate pride and ego. It'll come down. Humbleness will rise, and we'll be more and more compassionate and loving in our daily life. Making sense? Awesome. I like this, the message here. When we talk about, and this is a strong statement for me. I don't know, anybody of you have a family member or know somebody that just seems like bad luck is with them all the time? They got a gray cloud over their head, right? Just, if it's going to go wrong, it's going to happen to them. My brother is like that. It's just, he's always in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nothing seems to go his way a lot of times. And for a long time, we would just say, life isn't fair. Jeff's not lucky, right? It's not fair. But what this reminds me is the logical consequences of wherever we are today. That cause and effect, that slide that I showed you. Whatever's happening to him or to me or to you. And there's crazy things you would think, right? Why did children die at 6 months old? Right? Why did kids get cancer? Right? Why do we watch our friends slowly but surely lose control of their muscles through diseases like ALS? Right? Why? And why is that fair, right? I can remember a lot of times thinking, man, life isn't fair. God, why would you do this? But it comes down to those consequences, right? As we change our thoughts, our words, and our actions, little by little, these things evolve and get better, get easier. But we have to go through those trials, right? And through those experience that tribulation to help us get there. This doesn't seem fair, but it is. It's very logical, and it's very fair when you think about cause and effect. And then we're also reminded, stop complaining, right? Anybody out there a complainer? I am sometimes. Used to be a lot more, right? Sometimes when you just complain about your problems, like it's like you're venting, you're getting it off your chest, right? And it gets out there. But the gospel reminds us that stop complaining about our afflictions. We essentially heap them on ourselves. Anything negative that's happening in our life is coming back to us because of choices we've made previously. Most likely because we've ignored the saintly and divine ethic of Christ in the past. Not living morally, not trying to improve, coasting through, right? And ultimately, we are experiencing the consequences of that. So they remind us that if we've ignored that divine ethic, that don't be surprised when the cup of wrongdoing overflows on all sides and you experience some calamity, some fall, if you will, like my experience when I got so caught up in business that ultimately I failed, right? I got shook up because it was just going in the wrong direction. The instruction that they give, right, for the best way to overcome pride is to simply take Christ's law as your one rule of conduct, right? Stop placing greater value on the things that please your eyes than on those that please your soul, right? And I gave you a bad example probably, but it makes sense, right? Do more things that help your fellow man. Do more things based out of love for your fellow man, as opposed to the things that are pleasing to your senses. I'm not suggesting that we go live on an island or go live in a cave or don't enjoy life at all or any of the pleasures of life. But our pursuit, our primary pursuit should be focused on things that are pleasing to the soul, things that emulate what Christ taught us. More and more living like that as opposed to living from the ego and from the pride. And then also from the gospel, we're reminded, never forget, right? When pride reaches an extreme, it indicates an imminent transformation for divine justice is going to happen, right? To correct us, to bring us back down to common sense, if you will, or to a better path. We can fight it all we want, right? We can rebel all we wish, but the higher we rise, the worse the fall will be. This life or the next, whatever, right? It's going to come. Selfishness, we're told, will ruin everything it's touched. And over time, like we've talked about, it's going to catch up to us. So the sooner in life, right, that we can stop rebelling, stop fighting, stop being selfish, and living more Christ-like, the faster, more efficient, the less painful that evolution process is going to be. I don't know about you, but if I can get from A to B with less pain and suffering, I want that route, right? As opposed to the one that is a lot more painful. The cool thing is you are in control of this. I'm in control of this. We control the pace at which we evolve. We control the pace or the level or the intensity of the negativity, of the difficulties, by the way we respond to the things that happen to us. Humanity's asked, right, in the gospel to simply renew our courage, right? That every day is an opportunity. Not every day, every second, every moment, right? Every thought is an opportunity to renew our courage, and that we have this powerful cure for our sorrows, and it's simply opening our eyes to the light, right? To the good news. Not just that little book, but the entire gospel, right? The entire lesson of Christ. Opening our hearts to his message, finding time in the day to quiet ourselves, to meditate, to connect, to listen to our mentors, to our guardian angels, take their guidance, right, to heart, and just making better choices. And they go on to say that the greatest among us, right, is the humblest of the humble. I know humble people, and I'm nowhere close to being humble all the time. I still am full of ego and pride a lot of the time, right? Not terribly, but definitely I'm not as humble as they could be. I could learn a lot from these people. And from the gospel, right, be knowing that the humblest of the humble, right, the most prepared is the one who's loved his or her fellow humans. I don't go out of my way to do harm to people. I don't go out of my way, and I'm sure you don't either, to be a bad person. But knowing what I know after preparing for this talk, I have a lot of work to do, right? I can be more humble on a regular basis, and this just reminds me that I have work to do. How about you? You guys ready for the work? Yeah? I'm right there with you. It's hard, but we can do it. Because we're all spiritual beings, all right? At this moment in time, we're definitely in prison, right? Our spirit's tied through our perispirit to this physical body. My thoughts, my words, my actions in this body impart or imprint wrongdoing, good doing on that perispirit, ultimately onto my spirit. And I can choose, you can choose to do it at your own pace. We do. We are in control. We definitely don't, we do have a destiny, right? That destiny is Christ-like perfection. We will evolve over time, right? But we control how fast or how slowly or how painfully that happens. And it's all based on our strengths, right? And the way we build that strength day after day, life after life, right, is simply by practicing love. I say simply, right? It's so simple, right? I love that guy that cuts me off on the turnpike every morning, right? Love that guy, right? Yeah, right. I should, right? I should slow down and let him in, right? I should love him, wish him well. So I say simply, but it's hard. How about the guy that fires you, right? How about the guy that gets that promotion over you, right? When you think you deserve it. It's so easy to get caught up in all this stuff and forget that the easiest way to live, to evolve, to make our life so much less painful is to simply practice love, right? And the more efficient and less painful, the more we do that, the more efficient and less painful our involvement will be. And it's so easy to say, it's so easy to talk about it, it sounds so simple, yet we get caught up in the trap every day. I do. You guys, maybe not. But I get caught up into it regularly. And it really ties in to this, to one of my favorite charts, right? This is that spiritual path of evolution, right? Each one of us, our eternal spirit, created, including Christ, right? Every spirit that's ever created. Bottom left, right? Simple, lacking knowledge, imperfect. Life after life after life, evolving slowly but surely, or not surely, right? Maybe slowly, even more slowly, right? More painfully. But ultimately, all evolving to this pure spirit, right? If we're on earth, right, almost guaranteed that we're an imperfect spirit. There are exceptions of spirits that have come and walked the earth that weren't imperfect. But if we're living on earth, it's because we have not conquered ego and pride. We have not conquered letting love guide us more than material desires or pleasures. But regardless, we're going to get there. Just how fast and how painful is totally up to the choices we make. This, yes. Hey, how are you? What's going on?
I just wanted to say, because I also noticed this, it's also important that when we make small mistakes, rather than to be hard on ourselves, to also show ourselves love.
I love that.
Love for ourselves.
So important, right? It's a very good point. Thank you. I think it's easy to beat ourselves up, yeah? To be mad at ourselves or to have regret or guilt for the things we did wrong. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. You know, if you can do something bad once, right? But if you beat yourself up every day, your mind doesn't know the difference of the actual act or just from the memory. So thank you for reminding us. That's awesome. Thank you. So as we go through life after life, right? Whoops, there it is. We're in the body, which has been equated in some of the readings as a prison, right? We can't escape the body, right? Well, I guess we do at some point, right? When we pass, right? But when we're in the body, we are basically tied to whatever environment we're in. Our paraspirit is linked to that physical body. Ultimately, the actions, the thoughts, the words, the actions in the body imprint on the paraspirit, ultimately leading to the development and the progress of the spirit. And again, I'm reminded to remind you that a very simple way to look at that is cause and effect. There's no escaping our thoughts. We're never alone. We can lie to ourselves, but we cannot lie to the spirit. Right? It holds all truth. It holds all memory. I'm so grateful that I don't remember all the bad stuff I did in previous lives. We are born without a memory of our past mistakes. Thankfully, by the grace of God, we come here with a plan, right? We decide, along with our mentors, with our help of those who have gone before us, right? As we're healing in that errant state and in the spiritual realm, when it's time, when we're blessed with the opportunity to reincarnate, we come with a plan. Because on the other side, we know what we did wrong. We know how we lived. We know how we failed on our mission. And we make a new mission. We decide a lot of big things before we're born again. And we come here with total ignorance of that, no memory of that, with another opportunity to spend another 20, 50, 70, 80, 100 years in this body. Slowly, surely, hopefully, sticking to our mission to evolve. The good news is that the good news is love, humility, and compassion. That's the good news, right? That's what Christ taught us. That's how Christ lived. The take-home message is pride and selfishness are incompatible. If we are living in pride, if we're living in our ego, we're not practicing love, humility, and compassion. And we all do it to a degree. So don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to beat you up. I'm just reminding us that the less we can be in our heads, the less we can live pridefully or selfishly, the more we're going to be able to love and be humble and provide compassion towards others. Ultimately, we're here to conquer the kingdom of heaven, which, according to the gospel, is in our souls. All right? There isn't necessarily a fiery pit or pearly gates, but this kingdom of heaven, which is in our souls, is ours to conquer. Right? Through the example of Christ and following that example, being less tied to material vice and what have you, the more we are going to evolve and the more we're going to conquer our own inability, right? We're going to grow. And I love this slide. I'm not sure. I think Sabrina made this. I stole it. I borrowed it. Right? But this is every day, right? God gives us every day to be the butterfly, right? Go to sleep at night into our cocoon, right? Our everything turns off. Our spirit can go do whatever it does, right? We wake up with a new gift, right? We are the butterfly. We can create whatever we want in every second. It's up to us, right? We can choose pride, we can choose ego, we can choose love, we can choose humility. There's a guy, I think his name is Will Green. He wrote a book called This Is the Moment, I think. It's a Say It Now is the movement that these guys are like 85 years old, right? And it's all about paying it forward and being grateful and having gratitude. But if you ever listen to this guy, he talks about going to people's funerals, right? And he talks about all the wonderful things people say when you're dead, right? Why don't we say that to people when they're alive, right? So this guy did this on his 70th birthday or something. He invited people that were important to him. I think it was 44 people. And he took time to tell them publicly what they meant to him. And to your point, right, we should take the time to love ourselves and to tell ourselves, celebrate our successes and don't beat ourselves up for our mistakes. And gratitude, according to this guy, and I think the doctrine supports this, gratitude is huge. So being grateful for a new day, for a new opportunity, a clean slate, right, for the new day, to create our reality, however we choose, is a wonderful gift, right? With the gift of free will that God has given us, and the lovely example of Christ to follow. Can I do that alone, though? Can you do it alone? No. We need help, right? We need help. So we've got a lot of tools, but the best tool that we have, the biggest tool that we have, is each other. All right? I was asked to do a talk. I put together a talk, right? I'm not an expert. I don't live perfectly. I'm nowhere close to being perfect. I present it to you. I interact with you. You interact with others, right? Every moment of every day, we can count on our friends, our family, strangers, enemies to test us, to push us to where we have to make choices. Do we do the little devil with the horns decision, or do we make that angelic decision with a little angel on this shoulder? And by interacting with others, we grow, right? We couldn't go live under a bridge by ourselves. We couldn't go live on a deserted island and expect to grow. It requires interaction, right? The people that push me, the people that challenge me, the people that give me a hard time, I love them. It's awesome, right? Because I have to choose to be retaliatory. I have to choose to be mad. I have to choose to be passive aggressive. I have to choose to be loving, right? Whatever it is, their actions make me have to choose. So I thank you for helping me grow. I thank all those folks out there that have ever done me wrong. I thank them because I can go back in time. You can go back in time. And I can think of situations. And that's one of those things that guy Green talks about. I know the person I am today would make different choices yesterday, 5 years ago, 10 lifetimes ago. As much as I'm not living right sometimes, as much as I know I have so much more to do, I'm getting better every day. And it's because of you guys, right? It's because of the choices that you help me make. It's because of the interactions that I have to have with others. I make better choices today because of my hardships in the past. And if we ever get confused, and if we ever are trying to figure out where we are or how we can get better, I really think we don't have to go too far, right? The good news, the gospel, all shared this with us. All we have to do is do our best to follow the example of Christ, the way he walked the earth, the way he spoke to people, the way he interacted with people. He showed us the way. He saved us in that sense. He showed us how to live righteously, how to live morally, how to put other people first, how to put our ego and our pride in check, and simply to love and be compassionate. So as early disciples came to be known as followers of the way, that's how I like to look at myself, and I'm doing my best every day to try a little bit harder to follow his example. So I thank you for your time and your attention tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I learned preparing for this. So thank you so much. We're going to do a self-guided vibration tonight. So I'm gonna cue that up, and then when that's done, Tim is going to show you, or let you know when it's your turn for a pass. And again, thank you for being here tonight.